What's up, guys? I'm ThorendReynHERE, but you can call me Thor, and this is, well, my first long-form video on YouTube. I plan to make a series that I'm going to tentatively call Randomized Hard Mode Playthrough for Satisfactory. This episode will cover the starting of my new playthrough of Satisfactory 1.2, an experimental game mode that was released on March 17th, which includes a handful of compelling new features, such as a new fluid truck, an overhaul to the vehicle pathing system, the ability to daisy chain power lines from machine to machine, the reintroduction of the weather system, and much more. But what this video will focus on mostly is the new game mode modifiers that randomize locations of material nodes around the world and increase various cost requirements to progress through the game. I've clocked in over 700 hours into Satisfactory myself and have completed the original playthrough of the game, which, to my surprise, only about 5% of the player base on Steam have actually completed Phase 5. I'm not one to shy away from a challenge, as after I had completed Phase 5, I began a project of collecting all of the resources within the Rocky Desert biome. To which I had made substantial progress and had constructed a centralized export hub for the entire biome, but have since decided to start a new playthrough with a new update. So, what better way could there be to revisit the game than to crank up the difficulty to the max and document and share the process along the way? So right off the bat, we're greeted with a nice new title screen here. Kind of got a city cyberpunkish feel to it, so that's pretty cool. Alright, first things first, gotta select the starting area. I've always liked the Northern Forest aesthetic, and haven't really played there much before, so I think I'll start this new playthrough there. Before we get started with this new playthrough, we're going to go into the new game modes introduced in 1.2. The first one we've got is the Space Elevator Deliverable Cost Multiplier, and we'll set that to 100. Next, we've got the Recipe Parts Cost Multiplier, and after that is the Power Consumption Multiplier with times 5. That is actually a lot more challenging than you might think it is. After that, we've got a bunch of new options for Resource Node Randomization. Now, there's a couple of different options here you can choose from. One of them is just the basic resource rich, which increases coal, copper, iron, caterium, and limestone ratios. We have advanced resource rich, which is quartz, sulfur, bauxite, SAM, and uranium. And you also have got the fossil fuel option here for oil, coal, and sulfur ratios. You can also just set this to random, which is what I ended up doing here. Next up with something we can control in this new game mode is the resource node purity. And we can set things so that all nodes have just pure quality. Mostly pure, meaning it's going to be +1 than its normal. So if it's an impure node, it becomes a normal node. And if it's a normal node, it becomes a pure node. And then conversely, with the mostly impure, it goes down one level. You can go all the way down to impure if you're really psycho about it. And then you can just choose complete random, which is, again, what I ended up choosing for this playthrough. Lastly here, there's a little area where you can view the world seed. There it is, and I'll be sure to also put the seed in the description of this video if you'd like to join along. And with that, we are all set and ready to go to get this new modified, I would say even hard mode playthrough started. So let's get right into it. And would you look at how pristine everything is on a brandy new playthrough. It is beautiful and surreal, but not for long, as the very first thing I'm going to do is find a suitable place to put down the hub. Usually what I like to do is try to set up the hub in a centralized location with the 3 basic resources that we start with in the game here. So we'll start looking around, we'll ping the world, throw it on the compass here. And would you look at that? We already find a power slug. That is pretty fantastic. A great start with this playthrough here. It doesn't take me too long to find a little knoll here that overlooks a field. And I think this is a pretty good place to set down the hub and get started here. We will clear out all the brush. I'm sure we're going to need that later for our power needs with biomass. So let's go through that real quick and done. With that, we'll get started on our very first milestone here, base building, which gives us a lot of options here to start laying out our brand new factory. So we will go ahead and get started with the 200 concrete, 100 iron plate, and 100 iron rod requirement to complete the base building milestone. As I am about to go find the iron ore node, the RNG gods have blessed us with a SAM node right off the bat. First the power slug and now the SAM node. We just need to neutralize the local hostiles here and we can get a closer look at the SAM node. And would you look at that? Not only is it a SAM node, it is a pure quality SAM node. The RNG gods have so far definitely blessed this new playthrough. I head back to the hub to craft some biomass from previously cleaning up around the hub and clean up my inventory a bit before heading out to the nearby iron ore node. I get to work clearing out the brush in preparation to place down some portable miners, and the RNG gods bless this playthrough once again, granting a pure quality iron ore node for the starter factory. Speaking of portable miners, I head back to the hub to process the iron ore that we just collected into iron plate and place it down the equipment workshop so we can start crafting some of those wonderful portable miners. However, I'll need a few more iron rods before I can craft any of the miners, so I head back to the iron ore node to channel my inner dwarf, do my best diggy hole, and shout out the obligatory rock and stone before heading back to the hub. I create the required iron rods, and as I open the workshop menu, I realize I actually already had 4 portable miners in my inventory. Whoopsies! That's okay. It's not like I'm not going to use all these portable miners in the early game here anyway. With the equipment in hand, I plop down a few of the miners on the iron ore node before locating the next base material, copper. I make my way over there and happen to bump into a Mercersphere, the first one of this playthrough. I'll go ahead and clear out the locals here with some aggressive negotiations, collect the sphere, and be on my merry way. As they say, all good things must come to an end, and the lucky streak is now over, as this copper ore node here is just a regular old normal quality one. Could be worse, I suppose. It could have been an impure one, so we will take what we can get. Alrighty, just the limestone left to semi-automate. I'll just ping the map again, head on over to the node, and unfortunately this node is of impure quality. Probably the one material type that I don't want impure, as the material cost for concrete is already pretty high, especially seeing how construction costs are doubled for this playthrough. The next task to complete is placing down smelters to start automating ingots. Before getting back to the hub, I appreciate the value of automation and pick up 200 iron ore from the portable miners. I just need 5 iron rods and 8 copper wire, and bingo! The first smelter has been built. However, this new machine does absolutely nothing without some electricity. So I go back to the biomass burners included in the hub, fill them up with some biomass, and lay out the initial power lines for the growing factory. Up until this point, things have been mostly the same as a normal playthrough. However, after selecting the iron ingot recipe, it becomes apparent that the new game mode is about to take the gloves off. What used to be a 1-to-1 ratio of ore to ingots has now become a 2-to-1 ratio. One smelter now takes 60 iron ore per minute to feed, which maxes out the Mark I conveyor belt that we have available at the start of the game. Not only this, but the smelter now takes a whopping 20 megawatts of power. The biomass burners in the hub only produce 20 megawatts, meaning just one smelter consumes half of the power grid. As it stands, I can only use 2 smelters at once using the starter generators, whereas before you could get 10 in a normal playthrough. Absolutely freaking insane. Well, I did sign up for this after all, and the factory must grow. So I construct the items needed to place down the other smelter, go back to pick up some copper ore, and get copper ore ingots producing. With that out of the way, I'd like to start automating concrete. I place down the first constructor, and holy moly, would you look at that? It takes 90 per minute limestone to produce just 15 per minute concrete. An alarming 6-to-1 ratio. It also means that I have encountered the first constraint of the playthrough, as the maximum input rate we can supply machines right now is only 60 per minute, given the Mark I belt throughput. Speaking of constraints, there goes the power grid with just 3 machines. God damn. For the time being, I disconnect the constructor from the grid, reset the fuse box to get things up and running again, and get to work expanding the power production. One biomass burner costs 15 iron rods, 25 copper wire, and 15 iron plate to construct, which doesn't take me too long to cobble together, with the ingots being automated. With the requisite items in hand, I place down the burner in the back corner of my starting area, feed it some biomass, connect it to the network, and get 30 megawatts of power added to the grid. Wait, only 30 megawatts of power? So that means for every 2 burners, I'm only going to be able to power 3 smelters or constructors. Oy vey. Let's take a moment to let it sink in that the same number of burners in a normal playthrough would be enough to supply 15 of the aforementioned machines. Crazy. At this point, the game progression begins to slow down a bit. I spend the next 5 minutes or so just collecting various resources from the portable miners, making biomass from the wooden leaves I've been collecting as I run around the factory, and constructing basic items so that I can expand the power grid a bit. Getting up to 100 megawatts of total power produced. With that extra capacity overhead, I'm able to place down another constructor to start automating iron plates. This also marks the very first construction of conveyor belts for this playthrough. Very nice. Just the last thing to do is set the recipe, and we can now begin to see the challenge the 2x construction modifier adds. It doesn't sound like much at first, but the more stages of production that are required means the base resource cost scales exponentially. Let's take this small iron plate production line as an example. We have a 2x cost for turning the ore into ingots and then the ingots into plate. Comparing that to normal mode, we only need 1.5 iron ore to 1 iron plate. Whereas in this mode, it's exploded to 6 iron ore to just 1 iron plate. And because it requires so much more iron ore, that means we'll need more smelters. And more smelters means more electricity demand. As you can see, it spirals out of control really quickly. I spend the next 15 minutes gathering the raw resources, adding a storage container to the input of the concrete constructor, and supplying the hub with the items needed to finally wrap up the first milestone, base building. I waste no time setting the next milestone to logistics so I can gain access to lifts, but more importantly, splitters and mergers. As with the increased demand from all of my machines, I'll certainly need finer grain control over my conveyor belts. With the cost of 150 iron plates, 150 iron rods, and 300 copper wire, it takes me significantly less time to complete this milestone. I decide that I'll craft most of the items by hand while the machines passively make the ingots, so I can skip one entire stage of handcrafting and save a bit of time. After just under 20 minutes of this, the logistics milestone is complete and I have access to the splitters and mergers. With the 2 milestones complete, I can start focusing on laying out the foundations of the new factory. I placed the first foundations about 4 meters off the ground for 2 main reasons. To ensure I won't clip with the non-interactable grass on the ground, and it gives me access to the leaves to collect for biomass later. It will also allow for a subfloor for logistics if needed. I find myself running around a little more than I would like, so I start relocating the iron production line closer to the iron ore node. In addition to this relocation, I decide it's time to fully automate iron ore production and place down my first miner. However, this automation comes at a steep electricity cost of 25 megawatts. I add another 20 megawatts of consumption as I place down another smelter, so that I can periodically add iron ore by hand to boost my iron ingot production. With the 45 megawatts of power I now add to my grid, I have a total maximum consumption of 145 megawatts, 45 megawatts more than my current production. This should be fine, right? It was indeed not fine. That lasted all of about 45 seconds. Alrighty, I'll just plop down yet another biomass burner where my smelters used to be, and we're back up and running. This 5 times multiplier is going to be a little bit difficult to get ahead of. With the iron plates now fully automated and the power grid restabilized for now, I can get back to work on laying out the foundations again. However, seeing how each foundation is costing me 5 concrete apiece, it doesn't take long to blow through all my available supply. So, it's time to also relocate the concrete production line closer to the limestone node. This time, building on the brand new foundations. It's starting to look like a true factory now. As I'm constructing, I'm finding that I need a bit more iron rods, but I can't fully utilize the pure iron node yet, given the Mark I conveyor belt constraint. I don't think it's worth splitting the iron plate production in half either, so for the time being, I set up an iron rod production chain that I'll manually feed into a storage container from a few portable miners. I also decide that I should double up on my concrete manufacturing, as the effective rate of production is only 10 per minute right now. Again, from the limited input rate of only 60 limestone per minute from the Mark I belts. It's actually pretty crazy to see just how many design constraints I'm already running into with this game mode. And as I say that, I really need to stop jinxing myself. it turns out I wasn't actually producing enough power for the entire factory. It was just that not all the machines were running at the same time up until now. All right, well, I'll just temporarily shut down the miner, get the grid back up and running, create some wire, and place down another burner to get up to 160 megawatts of production. And with that, we're now producing more than the maximum consumption of the factory. Or so I thought. I think I might have hooked up another machine at some point to push the total consumption up to 165 megawatts of power draw. Man, all of this, and I haven't even gotten copper production lines set up yet. I can't imagine how many of these biomass burners I'm going to have to manage by the time I get to coal power, which at this point, I'm starting to think it's going to be pretty close to time to set up a more organized layout for the burners and auto-deliver fuel to them. But that's a future Thor problem. For now, I think I'll take a non-FICSIT approved break to check out the new selfie camera introduced in 1.2. Which I think is a pretty good place to wrap up this video. If you've made it this far, you are absolutely amazing, and I thank you so much for watching. I'm planning on making more videos of this playthrough as time permits. Let me know in the comments what you think of the new modifiers, randomized nodes, and 1.2 in general. If you enjoyed this content, please hit like and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. I'll leave you with a bit of cinematic footage of the starter factory so far, and until next time, have a good one.